In my previous life, the top student in our grade, my childhood friend Lucas, and a transfer student named Sophia developed a passionate relationship. Lucas, deeply in love with her, began skipping classes, drinking, smoking, and getting involved in fights. His academic performance took a drastic downturn. Eventually, his mother, Mrs. Taylor, intervened and helped Sophia steer him back on track. Lucas then went on to have a successful future and ended up marrying me. I thought my long years of unrequited love had finally paid off. But to my horror, just before giving birth, Lucas violently assaulted me, causing my water to break and leading to fatal blood loss. His enraged face haunted me as he yelled, "Emma, do you know it's because of you that Sophia's abusive husband killed her? Your perfect life was built on her pain. She's dead, so you don't deserve to live either." When I woke up, I found myself back in my senior year of high school. Lucas stood there, leaning against a wall, smirking at me. I remembered that day when I had smiled at them and offered my blessing. Youth is supposed to be wild. Only a passionate, fiery romance could make it truly worthwhile. I hoped they would be miserable together forever. Back then, Lucas and Sophia were inseparable, admired by everyone. They were the perfect couple. "Isn't that Lucas Taylor and his girlfriend?" someone asked nearby. "Wow, I'm so jealous." "And who's that over there?" another person asked. "That's Emma Green, the girl who's been chasing Lucas for years but couldn't win him over." How shameless. Their mocking voices were loud enough for me to hear, and it was clear they wanted to hurt me with every word. In my previous life, when Lucas asked me to meet him, I foolishly thought he was going to confess his feelings. I had even prepared a small gift for him, but instead, he showed up with Sophia to warn me off. "Emma, if you ever hurt Sophia again, don't forget we're not friends anymore," he said coldly. Sophia, in his arms, pretended to wipe away fake tears, looking heartbroken. I couldn't deny Sophia's beauty. She was mesmerizing, and it made sense why Lucas was drawn to her. Back then, I had longed to be the one in his arms. Now, looking at the two of them, I could barely suppress my disdain. They had hated me because I once posted pictures of Sophia drinking and partying on the school forum with a cheeky smile. "Fine, Lucas," I said. "I'll step back now. Youth is meant to be reckless. Only a passionate romance can make it worthwhile. I hope you two stay miserable together forever." With that, I turned and walked away, not wasting any more time on them. As I left, Sophia froze, watching me cautiously as if she feared I might try to steal Lucas from her. How absurd. In my previous life, Lucas had killed me during my pregnancy, leading to my water breaking and blood loss. What a scoundrel. If I could live again, I would not only refuse to forgive him, I would crush him if given the chance. Life is precious, and I intend to cherish this second chance. I packed my things, took a leave of absence, and decided to enjoy my youth to the fullest. "How could you upload Sophia's photos to the forum?" Summer teased. "Aren't you afraid her husband will get mad?" "Summer, say that again," I said, grabbing her ear. "He's my husband," she replied, though I refused to acknowledge that disgusting title. "You don't remember how pathetic you looked back then?" Summer sighed. "Even I wanted to punch you." I felt ashamed of my past self, the daughter of the Green family, lowering my status for Lucas Taylor, trailing behind him like a lovesick puppy, even disappointing my parents. Never again. I would use everything I had for myself and for my parents now. It wasn't like I wanted to take those photos of Sophia at the party. She had threatened me first, and I wouldn't let that slide. Summer nudged me playfully. "Look, isn't that your husband and his precious girlfriend over there?" Sure enough, there they were, Lucas cheering on Sophia. She stood out even among the smoke-filled hazy surroundings, dressed in a way that made her appear pure, different from the other girls. She only had eyes for Lucas, and he couldn't resist her. Skipping class, drinking, smoking, fighting. All of it for her. Poor Mrs. Taylor, if she knew, she'd be heartbroken again. "Check it out. The forum is going crazy," Summer said, waving her phone at me. "What's your plan now?" In my previous life, I had been dragged down by Sophia's schemes countless times, which ultimately led to my death at Lucas's hands. But this time I was prepared. "My plan," I said, opening a rarely used contact on my phone. "To play along. In my past life, I suspected Lucas of cheating after we married and hired a private investigator. This time my role was different. Are you going abroad or not?" I asked Summer. In my previous life, I had stayed in the same city as Lucas after high school, abandoning my dream of seeing the world just to stay with him. After we married, he forbade me from pursuing it, and that dream was buried until my death. Are you going or not? I pressed her again. If you're going, I'll go too, Summer replied, distracted, her eyes fixed on the cake in front of her. We quickly made plans to leave in 2 months. We would travel a bit before settling at a school abroad. By the time people were still swooning over Lucas and Sophia as the perfect couple, we'd be relaxing on a sunny island, sipping cocktails, living our best lives. But for some reason, Sophia couldn't seem to let me go. At Lucas's birthday party, she appeared in a flashy red gown adorned with sparkling crystals. The dress was as flashy as it was suggestive. I only went because I didn't want to upset Mrs. Taylor. My plan was to remain unnoticed throughout the event. However, Sophia had other ideas. The moment Mrs. Taylor walked away, she came over to me, holding a glass of wine. Emma, just delete the photos. Lucas and I might just forgive you if you do, she said with a sickly sweet smile. You could even spend time with us in the future, she added, her voice dripping with false kindness. How generous of her. Already picturing herself as the lady of the house, she leaned in, her gaze sharpening maliciously. In a hushed whisper meant only for me, she said, You know Lucas always listens to me. Some people are rotten to the core, no matter how well they pretend otherwise. I didn't flinch. Seems like you've been watching me more than your husband, I mused, raising an eyebrow. Her expression flickered. What? Sophia, are you secretly in love with me? I teased with a smirk. By the way, I'm not going anywhere. Bring it on. Lucas had been standing nearby, silently taking in the exchange. He hadn't interrupted, but something in his expression shifted. An unfamiliar tension, maybe frustration. His gaze darkened as he spoke in a low voice. Emma, didn't you hear Sophia? His tone was laced with warning. If you don't delete those photos, don't blame me for what happens next. His attempt at intimidation was almost laughable. A shiver ran down my spine, but not from fear, just sheer disgust. Don't be so hasty, Sophia. Your karma is coming, I said lightly. Then I glanced at Lucas. And yours too. My voice carried an unmistakable edge of mockery. In my past life, I had been nothing more than a lamb led to slaughter. Not this time. This time, I was the one holding the scales of justice. Sophia's smug facade crumbled the moment someone else approached, and she immediately switched tactics, softening her tone. Lucas, don't be too hard on her, she said, playing the part of the magnanimous woman, ever so understanding. Sophia was nothing if not cunning. She always knew how to manipulate the situation to her advantage. To an outsider, she might seem gracious and forgiving. But I knew better. I met her gaze head-on. I took those photos myself. Why should I delete them? I challenged. Besides, this is far from over. The air between us grew thick with tension. Then, Mrs. Taylor called Lucas over to greet some guests. He hesitated before finally stepping away, maintaining a careful distance from me, as if afraid his mother might misunderstand. If he could have placed himself 800 meters away, he probably would have. Not that I cared. Sophia, ever the performer, waited just long enough before gently patting Lucas's shoulder with an affectionate smile. Come on, Lucas, don't upset your mom, she coaxed. Let's go together. Mrs. Taylor exhaled sharply, irritation evident in the crease of her usually composed brows. The guests, oblivious to the real situation, continued their fawning. I seized the moment to slip away unnoticed. Just as I stepped outside, my phone vibrated with a message. Miss Green, everything has been handled as instructed. I had hired a private investigator, AAA, to stir up trouble. The timing was perfect. As drama unfolded at school, Sophia had been hiding, too scared to face the backlash. Now, several heavily built men, their arms covered in tattoos, had stationed themselves at the school gates, shouting for her. Sophia, get out here. You think you can scam me out of my money and just disappear? Their aggressive presence drew a crowd. Summer grabbed my arm, eyes gleaming with excitement. I observed the scene, and an eerie sense of déjà vu washed over me. I knew these men. They were the same ones from my previous life, Sophia's abusive husband's cronies. I had only intended to cause some trouble, but this was even better. Justice may be slow, but it always arrives. As the men continued yelling, their threats ringing through the air, the school security team rushed to intervene. Sophia had no choice but to seek Lucas's help. "Lucas, please help me," she pleaded, clutching his arm like a lifeline. Then she turned her gaze toward me, hatred burning in her eyes. Of course. I was always the convenient scapegoat. This time, though, she wasn't wrong. I had orchestrated this. I met her glare with a satisfied smirk. "Didn't you say you'd never associate with them again? Emma, you're enjoying this, aren't you?" Summer teased, grinning. Before Lucas could react, the thugs took a step closer, their voices rising. I had no interest in watching Lucas play the hero for Sophia's little damsel in distress act. Without another word, I turned and walked away. Summer hurried after me, practically bouncing with curiosity. "You're leaving already? Sophia's about to be exposed," she said, smirking. "Shouldn't you be savoring this moment?" I scoffed. "Am I that petty? Sophia is the protagonist of her own tragic drama. Let her enjoy the role." We walked against the tide of onlookers rushing toward the commotion. From a distance, I could still hear the men shouting, demanding Sophia face them. "Lucas has his fancy title, a pretty face, and good grades," I said. "But let's be honest. He doesn't have much else." Summer chuckled. "True. But if they keep pulling stunts like this, Mrs. Taylor will step in soon." "When that happens, it's game over for them," I agreed. "And even if nothing drastic happened today, ruining their reputation would be effortless." We hadn't gone far before the wail of sirens filled the air. An ambulance sped past. I glanced back. It seemed the situation had escalated. Someone had gotten hurt. Most likely, Mrs. Taylor would have to clean up Lucas's mess yet again. For so long, I had viewed Lucas through rose-tinted glasses. Now I saw him for what he really was. And the revulsion I felt was overwhelming. Not long after, he showed up at my house. He reeked of alcohol. Before I could even react, he pushed his way inside, slamming me against the wall. The stench of liquor was suffocating. In my past life, my heart might have pounded at his nearness. I might have melted into him like a fool. But I wasn't that girl anymore. "What do you think you're doing?" I snapped, shoving him off. He stumbled, pressing against me. His breath was hot against my neck, making my skin crawl. His words slurred together. I couldn't tell if he was genuinely drunk or just pretending. "Emma, you just don't get it," he muttered. "She's not like that. Sophia is kind and gentle." Before he could finish, he gagged, leaning forward as if he were about to vomit. "Ugh, if you're going to be sick, do it somewhere else." I grimaced, stepping back in disgust. Instead of moving away, he latched onto my wrist, gripping it tightly. When I was a kid, my parents argued all the time. They almost split up. I ran away that night. His voice was rough with emotion. I froze, startled by the abrupt change in his tone. "Sophia, she stayed with me all night, out in the cold. She didn't leave me alone," he continued, his grip tightening. So that's what this was about. I remembered that night. He'd been just as stubborn back then, refusing to return home despite the freezing air. He'd even made me swear not to tell anyone, afraid of making things worse. Like a fool, I had stayed with him, shivering beneath the playground slide until dawn. By the time I couldn't bear it anymore and ran to get help, Lucas had nearly frozen. If I had waited any longer, he might not have lived to become the infuriating man he was today. As he slumped against me, his usual arrogance faded, replaced by something quieter, almost fragile. "So, I'm your guiding star, huh?" I muttered under my breath, half joking. "And here I thought I was the villain in your little love story with Sophia." Not that it mattered anymore. "Sophia is an amazing person," he murmured. "I like her. I owe her. But why did you leave?" "Wait, what?" I blinked, taken aback. Annoyance surged through me, and I shoved him onto the couch. Wiping the sweat from my forehead, I demanded, "Who told you that?" "My mom," he admitted, inching closer again. Ah, that made sense. Mrs. Taylor had always been kind to me, despite how insufferable her son could be. If it weren't for the fact that he had driven a wedge between us, I might have actually considered her a friend. Lucas, this has nothing to do with you. Leave, I ordered, pushing him toward the door. Taking advantage of his drunken sluggishness, I shoved him out and locked the door behind him. His pounding on the door quickly became muffled as I put in my earbuds, pretending not to hear. He eventually passed out on the sidewalk. That was no longer my problem. Just then, Summer's video call popped up. Emma, check this out, she said excitedly as soon as I answered. She sent a screenshot, and as soon as I opened it, my confusion turned to anger. It was a post from Sophia's social media, featuring her at the headquarters of Green Enterprises, my family's company. The caption read, "Spending my break learning at mom and dad's company. Hashtag work hard, play hard." The comments were flooded with admiration, praising her as the perfect daughter from an elite family. What the hell? First, she stole my role as Lucas's angel. Now, she was claiming my parents as hers? I seethed. You can't blame me for being ruthless when you were heartless first. Turning to my computer, I typed out an email. The invitation was addressed to Miss Sophia Green, heiress of the Green family, formally inviting her to the Taylor family banquet as a special guest and officially announcing her relationship with Lucas. Her public humiliation would begin there. Everything I had suffered in my past, I would make sure she endured as well. The Taylor estate was dazzling with lights as the banquet commenced. Uniformed staff moved with precision, carrying trays of delicate pastries and crystal glasses filled with champagne. Although it was still early, a handful of guests had arrived, exchanging polite conversation as the soft clinking of glasses filled the air. Dressed in a rarely worn evening gown, I arrived at the Taylor residence ahead of schedule. My main goal was to speak to Mrs. Taylor one last time. Emma, don't worry, she reassured me warmly. I made sure there won't be any outsiders tonight. She put extra emphasis on the word outsiders, hinting at someone specific. I nodded, smiling sweetly. It's all right, Auntie. I just came to say goodbye. Mrs. Taylor squeezed my hand gently. You have my full support, she said. If you ever need anything, just ask. Oh, and there's a property in Italy. It's yours if you want it. Once this banquet is over, we'll go get the keys together. She genuinely treated me like a daughter. And for that I was grateful. More guests trickled in, gathering around Mrs. Taylor, raising their glasses in toasts. The atmosphere became livelier, filled with laughter and idle chatter. I wasn't accustomed to such events and only stayed long enough to mingle briefly before slipping away when Mrs. Taylor excused herself to change outfits. In the garden, a heated exchange caught my attention. Do you even know who I am? How dare you stop me? That sharp, entitled voice was unmistakably Sophia's. I'm sorry, miss, a bodyguard responded coolly. Mrs. Taylor gave strict orders. No unauthorized guests. Sophia, being Sophia, immediately pulled out her phone to call Lucas. With one glance at the screen, the guard sighed and reluctantly stepped aside. Sophia strutted into the banquet hall, drawing curious glances. Her overly saccharine smile barely concealed the temper she had shown moments earlier. Hello, everyone, she greeted, attempting to blend in. Instead of announcing her identity, she waited, expecting someone else to introduce her. Silence stretched across the room. After a few awkward beats, the guests resumed their conversations, effectively ignoring her presence. Sophia, either unaware or simply pretending not to notice, attempted to insert herself into various groups, acting as if she belonged. I had to admit, her shamelessness was almost impressive. Emma, I didn't expect to see you here, she called out suddenly, as if I was the one who didn't belong. Feigning innocence, she added, didn't the school's punishment teach you a lesson? She was referring to the scandal she had orchestrated last time. The incident had sparked an investigation, leading to her expulsion and Lucas's suspension. He hadn't set foot on campus since. As she mentioned it now, a flicker of resentment crossed her face before she quickly masked it with a bright, fake smile. Emma, your dress looks quite similar to mine, she remarked with an exaggerated tone of surprise. Her voice carried just enough to be overheard. Oh, but there are some slight differences. Her words immediately drew the attention of those nearby. It was uncommon to see such similar dresses at these events, and her remark suggested something more than coincidence. She lightly covered her mouth, feigning embarrassment. I'm so sorry, Emma. I hadn't noticed before. Well, everyone's circumstances are different, I suppose, she added with a syrupy sweetness laced with condescension. I maintained a cool smile. Circumstances may differ, but I don't wear imitations, and this dress wasn't exactly inexpensive. Sophia's expression briefly stiffened, but she quickly masked it. It's not about the price, Emma, she said, her voice sickeningly saccharine. What truly matters is what's on the inside. Exactly, I replied evenly, refusing to back down. And what's inside should match the exterior. If you wish to compare appearances, let's also compare character. Taking her hand gently, I added with mock concern. Sophia, your outfit suits you perfectly. That's what counts, after all. Whether it's genuine or not doesn't change that. Her smile faltered, though she struggled to maintain composure before the onlookers. Emma, what are you suggesting? My parents would never buy me anything fake, she declared, her voice slightly louder than necessary. At that moment, a voice from the crowd spoke up. By the way, may I ask what your father does for a living? A tense silence settled as all eyes turned toward Sophia, whose face paled slightly. My father is the CEO of Green Enterprises, she announced confidently, her voice carrying across the room. As expected, she took the bait. The murmurs of the crowd grew as skeptical glances were exchanged. Even though I had anticipated her audacity, I was still taken aback by how effortlessly she attempted to steal my identity. Did she believe I had no parents and had to borrow hers, Sophia? Stop humiliating yourself, I said coldly, narrowing my eyes. We both know I am the true daughter of the Green family. Pretending won't make it reality. Sophia, unfazed, delicately placed a hand on her chest, feigning offense. Emma, how could you say such a thing? If you doubt me, I can call the company right now. Under the watchful gazes of the crowd, she pulled out her phone and dialed. The line connected, and a professional voice answered. Good afternoon, Green Enterprises. How may I assist you? Sophia spoke without hesitation. This is Sophia Green. Where is my father? The room fell silent, everyone straining to hear the reply. Mr. Green is currently in a meeting, the voice responded. Would you like to leave a message? Sophia ended the call with a self-satisfied smile, turning to face the crowd. You see, I truly am the Green family heiress. And regarding my engagement to Lucas Taylor, why would I fabricate such a thing? She fluttered her eyelashes innocently, exuding the image of a wronged yet virtuous young woman. Even after experiencing rebirth, I still found myself stunned by her boundless audacity. Sophia was addicted to stealing. First my identity, then my family. Her words caused a subtle shift in the atmosphere. A woman in an ostentatious gold dress stepped forward, clearly on Sophia's side. Young lady, there's no need to pretend to be someone else, she said, her tone both patronizing and supportive of Sophia. I arched an eyebrow at the sheer absurdity of it all. Pretend? Me? You truly have an overactive imagination, don't you? Another guest interjected, chastising Sophia. There's no need to create unnecessary drama. The true Green family heiress is right here. Step aside. Exactly. You seem pleasant enough, but I can't believe you'd stoop so low. Another voice chimed in. The tide was shifting against Sophia, but she refused to surrender. Her smug expression returned, confident she could talk her way out of this. But this time, I wasn't letting her win. Her brief moment of triumph was interrupted as Lucas finally arrived, fashionably late. Why is everyone gathered here? He asked, his gaze darkening slightly when he spotted Sophia. For a moment, his expression wavered before he quickly moved to her side, instinctively shielding her. Sophia, what are you doing here? He asked, scanning the room anxiously, clearly wary of his mother's presence. The fear of Mrs. Taylor catching them together was evident. A bystander stepped forward to explain. This young lady claimed to be the Green family heiress and Lucas Taylor's fiancée. She's been rather disrespectful and even had the audacity to attend the Taylor banquet uninvited. Lucas's eyes darted between me and Sophia, disbelief evident. Despite our childhood friendship, he appeared to have completely forgotten that I was the real heiress. Sophia had banked on the fact that few people had met me in person and assumed she could deceive everyone. But Lucas, of all people, should have known better. After all, we had grown up together. This time, her lies would come crashing down. Lucas, ever the fool, attempted to defuse the situation. This is all just a misunderstanding. I think Sophia might be a little confused, he said, turning to me with a pleading look. Can't we just let this go? I rolled my eyes so hard it almost hurt. Really? Lucas, you're still defending her? Perhaps we should stop calling you Mr. Bold and start calling you Mr. Gullible. Before he could reply, a melodic voice cut through the tension. Miss Green, your dress is absolutely stunning. Is it one of Dia's classic designs? I couldn't get my hands on it when it was released. A woman in a dark green gown adorned with glittering diamonds approached with effortless grace. Her elegance was undeniable, but there was a playful sharpness in her demeanor. I recognized her instantly. Vivian, Lucas's aunt. I had met her a few times in my childhood, and she had always been full of charm, sneaking us out for burgers when no one was looking. You're as beautiful as ever, Aunt Vivian, I said with a smile, effortlessly slipping into conversation. She returned the smile warmly, placing a hand on my arm. And you've grown into such a lovely young woman. Emma, it's been far too long. Just a few words from her were enough to dissolve the tension. The tide was turning, and I was eager to see how Sophia would attempt to escape this time. She pulled me into a brief embrace, a wide grin lighting up her face. You've grown so much, Emma, but your charming little compliments remain the same. The onlookers observed our conversation, their expressions puzzled. Few in this room knew me personally, but almost everyone recognized Vivian, Lucas's aunt. Lucas, sensing the rising tension, shot Vivian a series of frantic glances, silently urging her to defuse the situation before Mrs. Taylor returned. I believe it would be best if this young lady left the Taylor estate, he stated firmly. With Lucas taking a stand, Sophia found a boost of confidence. Others, emboldened by his words, joined in. We don't welcome uninvited guests here. Who even invited you? Leave at once. Accusations flew across the room, hostility directed squarely at me. And where exactly do you intend to send my guest? Mrs. Taylor's voice sliced through the tension, calm yet commanding. She had returned, her gown flowing gracefully as she entered the room. Emma is staying, she declared with unwavering authority, her gaze sweeping across the guests. A hush fell over the room as eyes turned to Sophia and Lucas, waiting for their response. Sophia instinctively tried to step back, but Lucas gripped her arm, holding her in place. Don't worry, Sophia, he said, attempting to sound gallant. This time, I'll protect you. And just like that, the theatrics escalated. Here was Lucas, stepping into the role of the devoted guardian. Lucas, let go of me, Sophia hissed, struggling to break free. Mrs. Taylor's sharp tone made her stance abundantly clear to everyone present. Emma is my guest. Sophia, I suggest you rethink your actions. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Wait, could she really be the Green heiress? I've never seen her before, but the CEO of the Green family business carries the same name. Mrs. Taylor, ever poised, raised a hand, silencing the murmurs. Apologies for the disturbance, she said smoothly. Please, continue enjoying the evening. I'll return shortly. Despite her polite dismissal, not a single person left. Curiosity far outweighed decorum as they strained to witness how events would unfold. Lucas, Mrs. Taylor sighed, exhaustion heavy in her voice. I can't stand by and watch you destroy yourself over a liar any longer. If you're willing, I'll set aside my pride and arrange a suitable match for you. When the time is right, I'll even plan your marriage. But if you insist on clinging to this delusion, I've had enough. I no longer consider you my son. A collective gasp echoed through the room. Several glasses slipped from hands, shattering on the floor. Publicly disowning her only son. This was a scandal unlike any seen in elite circles. Mrs. Taylor, surely this isn't necessary, one guest ventured cautiously. Although I had long moved past any feelings for Lucas, I hated to see mother and son at such odds. Mrs. Taylor had reached her limit, but I had long accepted that whatever she had planned with Lucas would never bring me happiness. Mom, you can't do this to Sophia. Lucas pleaded, his voice desperate. Mrs. Taylor turned away, unwilling to argue further. Her usual grace had been overshadowed by the humiliation Sophia had brought upon her. Mom, don't you remember? Lucas shouted, grasping at his last thread of justification. Sophia saved me that night. Sophia, ever the opportunist, latched onto the moment like a drowning woman grasping a lifeline. "Yes, Mrs. Taylor," she added tearfully. "It was me who stayed with Lucas that night when he lost consciousness. I looked after him and called for help." Her performance might have been convincing, if not for the glaring contradictions. Unfortunately for her, the truth was that Vivian had been the one to let me in that night. It was Vivian who had called the ambulance. Vivian's voice cut through Sophia's fabricated tale like a blade. "I was the one who opened the door that night. I called the ambulance. And if I recall correctly, Emma was the one who stayed with Lucas the entire night. Not you, Miss Green." Sophia's face drained of color, her carefully woven deception unraveling before everyone's eyes. Gasps swept through the room. Lucas visibly staggered, gripping the table for balance. "Unbelievable," someone murmured. "So she lied about everything?" I let out a quiet chuckle. "Not just that," I muttered under my breath. "This is only the beginning." Sophia, now fully exposed, clung to Lucas in desperation, her tear-filled eyes darting around for a way out. But there was none. The damage was done. Vivian's words carried the weight of finality. "Miss Green, perhaps next time, think twice before impersonating someone you're not. Deception is bad enough, but stealing Emma's identity? You overplayed your hand." Lucas looked utterly shattered. He turned to me, disbelief written all over his face, as if he had the right to cast me as some kind of villain. The more Lucas tried to appear clever, the more foolish he became. Vivian wasn't finished. "If there were an award for self-sabotage, Lucas, you'd take first place. No contest." "So this is the true Green heiress?" someone whispered in the crowd. "Exactly. How could the Taylor family even consider letting someone like Sophia marry into their name?" Sophia, realizing the tide had turned completely against her, attempted to slip away unnoticed. But the bodyguard at the door quickly blocked her path. Disheveled and frantic, she no longer resembled the poised woman she had pretended to be. Her entire facade had crumbled. Lucas's eyes were red-rimmed, his emotions teetering on the edge. He looked at me with a mixture of regret, pain, and frustration. But whatever he felt no longer mattered. There was no going back. With the truth laid bare, I made a quick call to my father. Within minutes, I had a full investigative report in my hands. It revealed that the woman Sophia had called earlier wasn't a doctor, as she had claimed, but a bartender she had befriended. Someone who also happened to work the reception desk at Green Enterprises. They had orchestrated a scheme in advance, with Sophia assuming a false identity in exchange for a generous reward. Fortunately, their plan was exposed before it could cause serious harm to my father's company. Once everything was confirmed, I contacted the police. Sophia was taken into custody for defamation and other criminal activities. Further investigation unveiled the extent of her illicit dealings. As the sound of sirens faded, a sense of relief swept over me. Every injustice she inflicted upon me, every moment of humiliation, justice had finally been served. On the way to the airport, Summer revved up her bright pink Maserati, the engine roaring as loudly as her personality. Having just obtained her driver's license, the thrill was still fresh. Her erratic driving made me grip the door handle tightly. "Slow down, Summer. We're not in that much of a hurry," I shouted, trying to keep my voice steady. Unfazed, she gritted her teeth and pressed harder on the gas. "I'm not letting him catch up." "Who's following us?" I asked, puzzled. She nodded toward the rearview mirror. "That gray car behind us." I turned to look. A dark gray Maybach was trailing us, its presence unmistakable. "That's Lucas's car," I muttered, recognizing the license plate. His serious expression left no doubt. He kept trying to overtake us but never succeeded. "Is your ex-husband chasing you?" Summer teased. "Just keep your eyes on the road," I snapped, not in the mood for jokes. Our cars racing down the main highway attracted plenty of attention, but in the end, we arrived at the airport first. As we boarded the plane, I saw Lucas being held back at security, frustration evident on his face. Once in the air, my phone lit up with repeated calls from him. Without hesitation, I deleted his number and blocked him. "For Mrs. Taylor's sake, let's end this chapter for good," I whispered to myself. "You go your way and I'll go mine." Summer leaned back, smirking. "Wow, Emma, you're cold. Absolutely ruthless." I didn't bother explaining. Some things were better left unsaid. If Summer ever discovered that Lucas had nearly ended my life in our past, she'd probably jump out of the plane just to confront him. Men will betray you without a second thought, Summer declared dramatically. But a best friend? She'll grab a knife and fight for you. Upon landing in Italy, the warmth of the sun and the scent of the sea welcomed us. Once we settled into our villa, Summer wasted no time slipping into her swimsuit. Out with the old, in with the new, she announced. A few kisses from these Italian hunks, and I'll forget everything. I chuckled, watching her attempt to charm a group of locals with her broken English, which only made her more endearing. Meanwhile, I stretched out on a lounge chair, basking in a rare moment of peace. As evening approached, exhaustion crept in, and I returned to the villa early. When I reached the door, I noticed something unusual. The once vacant apartment next to ours now looked occupied. The dust and cobwebs were gone, replaced with a neat shoe rack. The transformation had happened in just one afternoon. Curious, I grabbed a small gift and knocked, intending to introduce myself. Footsteps approached from inside, but no one answered. Strange, I thought. Perhaps they were shy, or maybe I didn't appear very approachable. Dismissing the thought, I returned to my room and quickly fell into a deep sleep, until Summer flopped onto my bed. Hey, dinner's here, she announced. It's at the door. Did you order it? Rubbing my eyes, I mumbled. Dinner? I've been asleep this whole time. Maybe the neighbors left it at the wrong door, she suggested. A few minutes later, she returned, clutching the food with a horrified expression. Emma, we have a problem. Your ex-husband is here. I sat up, alarmed. How do you know that? Didn't you notice the umbrella by the door? It's his. At her words, I collapsed back onto the bed with a groan. Fantastic. He's back. And now we'll never get rid of him. For the next few days, nothing much changed, except for the fact that wherever we went, Lucas was nearby. He never showed himself though, which was a small mercy. At least he has some self-awareness, Summer remarked, nibbling on a cake Lucas had sent. He knows if he shows up, he'll just irritate everyone. A small note came with the cake. Emma, if you like this, let me know. I've already gotten the recipe from the bakery for you. Without hesitation, I tossed it into the trash. This was the 21st time this month he had sent me something. Was this his idea of an apology? Some desperate attempt at reconciliation? Lucas always lived in his fantasy world, believing he could mend everything with grand gestures. But his apologies weren't just for me. He owed them to our unborn child, to my parents who had buried their daughter, and to himself for destroying everything good in his life. His remorse had come far too late. It meant nothing now. Eventually, Summer and I settled into university life in England. Stability returned. Our days were filled with classes, our evenings with shopping, cooking, or watching movies. A fellow poetry club member asked me out a few times. He was the epitome of a gentleman. Tall, handsome, wealthy, and considerate, never overstepping boundaries. He seemed like the kind of prince charming most women dreamed of. One night, after a casual dinner, he walked me home. A slight buzz from the wine left me feeling lightheaded. As we said goodbye, he leaned in and lightly kissed me before I could react. Good night, he said softly, his tone casual. I froze for a second but quickly brushed it off. Maybe this was just how foreigners behaved. Open and direct. I didn't dwell on it and still only saw him as a friend. As I approached my apartment door, a shadow loomed in the hallway. The dim light obscured the figure's identity, but before I could make sense of the situation, I was abruptly pulled into the neighboring apartment. A strange warmth pressed against my lips, and instinctively, I pushed against the person holding me. What are you doing? Let go of me, I demanded. As the pale moonlight streamed through the window, his face became visible. Lucas. His eyes were rimmed with red, filled with emotions he struggled to contain. Why did you let him kiss you? He asked, his voice shaking. It's my fault. I know I made mistakes. Please, Emma, give me another chance. I'll make it up to you. I'll be better. Just let me try again. Desperation seeped into his voice as warm tears landed on my neck. His grip on my waist tightened, making it hard to breathe. This is how you show remorse? I asked coldly, forcing myself to stay calm. My words seemed to strike him. His hold loosened, and he stepped back, retreating into the shadows like a wounded animal. "I'm sorry. I lost control again." "It won't happen anymore," he murmured. The once proud and confident Lucas now looked utterly defeated. But I felt nothing for him. No anger, no pity. Not even the faintest trace of affection. He was a man ruled by impulsive emotions, incapable of change. Saying nothing more, I turned and walked away, shutting the door behind me. From that day, Lucas stopped hiding. He followed me openly, making no effort to conceal his presence. "Seriously, Lucas," Summer groaned after days of enduring his relentless pursuit. "You're rich and handsome. You could have anyone. Why are you stalking us?" Her words didn't faze him. He simply smiled and continued tailing us. Wherever we went, he paid for everything, silently covering our bills. At first, we ignored him, thinking he'd eventually give up. But when he enrolled in my classes and joined the same club, I could no longer remain indifferent. One evening, in a quiet cafe with soft violin music in the background, Lucas sat across from us at a poetry club meeting. Summer and I exchanged exasperated looks, unable to enjoy our coffee. "Isn't it time to let go?" Summer finally said, frustration lacing her voice. A dark flicker passed through Lucas's eyes. "Emma, why is he always with you?" he asked, voice low. "That's none of your business," I replied coolly, turning away. His facade cracked. "But he's trying to take you from me. You're supposed to be my girlfriend." Puh, another club member, didn't understand Chinese, and Summer's English wasn't great. He kept gesturing, trying to grasp the conversation. Summer waved him off dismissively, unwilling to explain. Lucas let out a short, bitter laugh at Poe's confusion. For weeks, he had played the part of a changed man. Cooking, cleaning, even wielding a mop. The moment he heard we were going out, he'd drop everything and follow, seeking validation for his efforts. "Emma might not like the food here," Lucas began, forcing his way into the conversation. "I made soup at home. When will you come back to drink it?" Summer, losing patience, shot back. "We can cook for ourselves." Lucas persisted. "I also made desserts. Your favorites, Emma." He subtly adjusted his sleeve, revealing a fresh burn mark, hoping for sympathy. But I wasn't the same person anymore. His attempts to win me over fell on deaf ears. Then, in a sudden outburst, Lucas slammed his hand on the table, drawing the attention of everyone in the cafe. We braced for a scene, but instead, he dropped to one knee and pulled out a ring. His expression was a mix of determination and desperation. "Emma, I've done so much for you. I'm even kneeling now. Please, give me another chance." "Stop. Just stop," I cut him off coldly. "Don't act like you're doing me a favor. I never asked for any of this." His hand trembled as he froze in place. Standing up, I motioned for Summer and Pa to follow me. Lucas grabbed my arm as I turned to leave. "Did you sleep with him?" he hissed. "You never used to reject me like this." The room fell into stunned silence. Murmurs spread among the onlookers. "You can't force her," someone whispered. "That guy looks unhinged. Should we call the police?" Realizing the growing attention, Lucas hesitated before reluctantly releasing me. As I walked away, clarity struck me. Lucas was trapped in his delusions. He couldn't see past his own ego and desperation, clinging to a past that no longer existed. Later, Summer mused, "Pa is kind, gentle, and charming. Most importantly, he treats you well. There's no reason not to like him." "Exactly," I agreed. Her tone sharpened. "Lucas isn't in love with you. He's obsessed with the idea of winning you back. It's all about his pride." The truth hit Lucas harder than anything. Enraged, he lashed out but was quickly subdued and escorted out by Pa. A few days later, he resurfaced, impeccably dressed, driving a luxury car in a final misguided attempt to impress me. Instead, he only drew scorn. A blonde woman publicly berated him, and soon after, he gave up. His family cut off his credit cards. Without financial support, Lucas vanished. The apartment next to ours became vacant once more, its furniture removed. Summer later told me Lucas had returned to his home country, where his life spiraled further downhill. His parents had abandoned him, choosing a new heir. Left without his wealth and privilege, Lucas drowned himself in alcohol. As for Sophia, she had married the same man as in our past life. But her lies and schemes eventually caught up to her. During a violent dispute over money, she was beaten to death by him. The tattooed thugs associated with her husband turned their frustration onto Lucas, constantly harassing him for debts she had left behind. When I heard this, I didn't know how to feel. This was the fate they were always destined for. Meanwhile, Summer and I moved forward. Between school and travel, we filled our days with new experiences and adventures. My long-delayed dream of seeing the world finally became reality. The road stretched ahead, and for the first time, it was ours to control.